November 1st, DRB
Come on, we don't have
meeting to
something
order.
for Rolf that's official yet?
Dennis is our
This is about
stainless
as
steel
official.
man. So
You haven't emailed me. You haven't emailed me.
Am I supposed to? Okay.
All right.
Dennis likes me, I know that.
First up is agenda changes. I don't know of any.
I don't have any for you.
All right. Board members can review the minutes of October 18th.
Look good to me.
I had nothing, but I'm not trying to rush anybody.
Same here.
I didn't have anything.
Dawn is magnificent.
Yep.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as drafted.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next up is Hinesburg Center LLC.
I will step aside.
Okay?
Good night, John.
Not going anywhere.
It's the only thing.
World Series, sir.
Well, why did you come?
So Brett, if you can come front and center and give us a little overview of what you're doing.
I actually did not bring my laser pointer down. Let me go grab it. Do you want a particular plan up on the on screen? Yeah, sure. That's my point, though. Do you want which plan would you like me to display? It should be either to the left of where I sit or in my top drawer. If you want to look there. Thanks, Mitch. Okay, so you want the overall plan,
No, we can just go right to.
the reduced version?
Yeah.
Okay, coming right up. I'll zoom in a little. So while Mitch is grabbing the laser pointer, maybe I can just do a little exposition for the viewing audience.
Yes.
Since you have a staff report in front of you, but they don't. So this application for Hinesburg Center Phase 2 is the next phase of development to the west of the Kinney Drugs, Bristol Bakery, Deep Physical Therapy development, which is Hinesburg Center Phase 1. And this project received a sketch plan approval back in 2015, I believe. And Brett, the developer, submitted a preliminary plat application, the next step in the three-step review process for major subdivisions, back in the fall of 2015. And you started your review of that preliminary plat on October 6th. So it's been over a year. And you haven't really done any substantive review on the project because of the water supply issue and the fact that there isn't currently enough water to supply the overall project. So Brett's asked for, and you've granted 2 or maybe 3 continuances to allow for more time for the water supply issue to be addressed. And so we're back here tonight. Because that's when you last continued the project too. At the same time, Brett received a conditional use approval for fill in the flood hazard area to make this project possible. That actually happened before, back in 2013. And the thought at the time was that it doesn't make sense to do a comprehensive review of a project that relies on fill in a flood zone if you can't get that approval. So you did grant him that approval. That approval expired. It was good for a year. It was extended for a second year and then expired. So at the same time as coming forward with the preliminary plat application for the overall project, Brett resubmitted an application for that flood hazard approval. That came before you, I believe, in May of this year and was also continued to this meeting in lieu of the uncertainty with the project in general and also some back and forth with the state floodplain folks about some changes that they have in the Act 250 process that we would like to kind of sync up with at the local level. So, with that said, Brett, it's all yours.
So what you're, maybe the full size.
Okay.
plan.
See if I find the right one. There's this one, Brett, and then there's
That's fine.
the one that shows the westerly property with the solar panels as well.
Is that, this'll work efficiently. You've all read through staff comments, I assume. This project is what was originally, more or less what was approved at sketch plan level and was brought forward as a preliminary plat application. We've had a number of meetings where the biggest crux of the issue is the water dilemma that is ongoing in the town. There has, I'm not really sure how vigorously Eric is pursuing drilling a couple of the wells. We had a discussion about the last meeting.
Yeah, I can actually give you an update on that if you
Okay.
like. So
Yeah.
just today, Mitch and I were able to speak with Eric Bailey. He's the water and wastewater superintendent. So what's happened over the last year and a half or so is that the town has drilled exploratory wells along Shelburne Falls Road in the hopes of finding additional water supply beyond the 2 new wells that were just added to the system recently. None of those wells along Shelburne Falls Road panned out with enough volume to warrant developing them into a public water source. So we had a hydrogeologist identify additional sites in the same general vicinity, and that woman identified 2 sites on the Haystack Crossing property, which BlackRock Construction is interested in developing and has, a project under review by you, and 1 site on the Lyman property that Brett is working on. So earlier this year, BlackRock agreed to actually fund exploration on their property, and so just in the last couple weeks, there's been a well drilling rig out there. Vermont Well and Pump, our local well driller, is doing that work, and the results are not quite in yet. So they have some. There's some good news and there's some bad news with regard to the initial drilling that they did, but according to Eric, they need to test it some more to see if the well that they just sunk is going to be a viable well. It may be. So we're still in the exploration phase. I think they've done 1 of the 2 sites on the Haystack Crossing property. And they haven't yet moved to the Lyman property, and they won't if these wells on the Haystack Crossing property pan out. But it's still a work in progress.
So with that being said, Alex basically contacted me a week and a half ago, two weeks ago, essentially. And we kind of had this discussion in regards to the water, and really stating, even in light of finding that water source, it is still most likely going to be, I don't want to say years, but it's certainly going to be a significant amount of time
Yeah,
before.
at least a year and a half
Yeah.
to 2 years, even if it was great water source, just to bring it online, get it permitted. Yeah.
So, but what the select board has done is there is existing water capacity, there is not zero. And the town or the select board has earmarked some of that capacity for the village center area. Currently, right now, that amount is 5,000 gallons. With that 5,000 gallons in mind, Alex basically sent an email to saying, is there something, is there a way, or would it be of interest to you financially, potentially to go forward, or does it work feasibly to design a portion of the project that you could do with that 5,000 gallons to move some of this project forward? So after a trade of a few emails, we essentially created this plan, which is a version, obviously, of the overall. This road network essentially stays exactly as was designed before, and these buildings are pretty much the same as what was originally proposed. Under the 5,000 gallons, it's still there's some investigative work needs to occur to figure out what that mix is going to be from a standpoint of residential versus commercial. The 5,000 gallons, depending on what the trade-off is from 1-bedrooms to 2-bedroom units. 1-bedroom units require 140 gallons a day. 2-bedroom and up require 210 gallons a day. And then obviously you have whatever your commercial uses are. Office retail is obviously going to have the least impact in regards to water. And that's all based upon the number of employees. So with that in mind, essentially a number or a mix of 1 and 2-bedroom units of approximately 25, maybe a few more, and for residential, leaving potentially roughly 800 gallons remaining for retail commercial, would allow a portion of this project potentially to move forward under the existing approved capacity that the select board has moved forward in regards to water. The sewer that would go along with it, there is more than that amount of sewer capacity available. Certainly, obviously, then there would to support the water that they have earmarked. So this is what we have created. More, since it's kind of under short notice, a little bit more research would need to go into to say, hey, what is that specific mix in regards to residential and commercial, what those potential direct uses would be. Most likely under this new scenario, if you remember, this building here was actually earmarked for roughly 5,000 square feet of commercial and 28 residential units. This building would most likely be reduced in size than the footprint you see here. The other thing that we've done in order to allow this to move forward is this stormwater facility here that is existing would be enlarged to handle the capacity stormwater that would be from this existing infrastructure. We would still move from a lot of the other engineering that was done for this site would really still be useful. We had always talked about this area and the creekside area being raised up and creating better drainage, and certainly that is still completely possible under this new design. The engineering plans that we had put up before actually had this being raised, as well as catch basins being put in here to basically catch the water that right now is forced to try to go through some very small culvert that's basically right here going underneath the water, the sewer, and the berm that was put into when they ran the water and sewer down through here a number of years ago. So under this new design, what we had planned to do for this area, this open lot in the Creekside neighborhood, would still be able to move forward. And so this is, staff comments obviously suggested that this meeting be continued again for us to have some meetings to potentially work out details of what you see here. It could potentially change. Certainly the size of these buildings would most likely change. Footprints would change due to the reduced number of units that we're potentially proposing.
So Alex, as I understand that this is kind of an unusual, I for one have never been in this procedural posture as I perceive it, where we're basically being asked to give an advisory opinion about the board's general willingness to think about entertaining a drastically revised preliminary plat proposal instead of sending something back to sketch. And I'm hearing Brett say he's willing to invest some resources if there's consensus on the board to allow him at least to go forward. We're not making any commitment as a board that we'd approve something, but he seems prepared to at least consider investing resources in trying to configure a drastically reduced proposal that could get through preliminary plat and then presumably final plat pending resolution of all these water issues. I don't want to discourage Brett from putting money into a project, but just my one personal reaction is this is a significant change from what we had approved. An important building that was altered from I think mixed use to light industrial during the sketch plan process has been eliminated. There aren't obvious open spaces within the to-be-built area. I just would have trouble approving this as a huge amendment to a preliminary plat without asking for a revised sketch plan approval.
Well, that's really the question that I was hoping you would answer tonight. Not review the guts of the project, not get into the weeds, but just give a clear answer on whether it's time to deny the project and without prejudice and just say, it's time to go back to sketch, or allow it to move forward. So I know what your vote is, Greg.
Well, I'm just expressing some thoughts.
Yeah. Staff
There's a
has
lot
been-
of, Brett has not had much chance to pitch his proposal, and there's audience here, and
I will just say before I shut up that staff has been recommending that you deny this project since October of last year, because there's just not enough water and it needs
And
to
I've
be
been
a
resistant to
substantial-
that.
I
I've
know,
probably
I
been a
know.
leader
So-
of that.
So although I've reached out to Brett and I'm trying to help him find a way forward, that original recommendation is still valid, and so you just need to give us guidance so Brett knows which stage of the review he needs to, keep going on or restart at.
So right now, when does the sketch run out on this?
So this there was a preliminary plat application submitted, so sketch can't run out.
Okay.
At this point, you've had an active preliminary plat application for over
That
a
we've
year
continued a couple times.
that you've been continuing. So
Got
either adjudicate it or
Right.
give it maybe one last continuance and then let's get it figured out.
So does this project have sewer allocation?
It's contested. Brett made an application, the select board denied it, and we're in court.
Oh,
But in terms of the capacity, we have the wastewater capacity for what's proposed in front
But not
of
for
you tonight.
Creekside as
Not for the
approved in the sketch plan.
Not for the entire sketch plan, no. But
Well,
for
actually, you would. There is capacity, the application that was from the select board was for 25,000 gallons.
right,
And there is sufficient capacity to support that request.
it's complicated in the sense that the new wastewater allocation ordinance says that we can't grant wastewater capacity if we don't have the corresponding water capacity. And we definitely do not have the corresponding water capacity. What we do have the water capacity for, as Brett mentioned, is a project of this size. And we certainly have wastewater capacity for a project of this size to match that water capacity without triggering any sort of need to upgrade the wastewater facility with regard to the phosphorus discharge limits. I clarified that with Eric Bailey this morning, so, yeah, a little complicated, but we do have both water and sewer for a scaled back version, similar to what's proposed.
But they haven't decided how they're gonna divvy it up though, the sewer.
Oh, they have, yeah. For this current year that we're in, we have water and wastewater allocation ordinances with the same sort of policies that we had previously. They tuned those up, made a couple of minor changes, and made it clear that they're not gonna grant one without the other. So water is currently the limiting factor. No one's gonna get more wastewater capacity than there is water capacity.
And the select board, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, in the regulation, in the set aside that they do every year, there are several categories.
Right.
And so they really put it all in what water that they deem as available. This is the only category where or maybe there's a little bit in the industrial, not very a lot,
Well,
but-
to clarify, there are about 11,000 gallons, give or take, of water, gallons per day of water that we have available to give out this year. 5,000 of it, the ordinance sets aside for sort of special projects. If the school needs more, if the town needs more, maybe if there were some sort of special senior housing project that the town was interested in. So 5,000 gets set aside for that. 5,000 is then allocated for the village core, so it includes this property, but the rest of sort of the core village area as well. And then the balance goes out to the rest of the service area, which is only about 1,100 gallons per day. So that's, everything on the BlackRock project, the NRG Systems project, and everybody else in the sewer service area outside of the village core.
So there is a possibility that this could be the end of this project.
What could be?
If we,
This phase of it could,
It could be the end of development, period.
right.
if
in-
we
in
saw no
Hinesburg.
further water supply, then yeah, this could be the last development on the property. But again, there are a lot of details, and I think some of the public comments that I emailed you just today and that were in your packets that just came in the last 2 days have a lot of substance in them and a lot of good questions. But those questions relate to the sort of the meat and potatoes of an actual review. And I would recommend you not go into those meat and potatoes because there's a more basic question that Greg sort of hit on. If we're going back to sketch, then this just becomes a conceptual kind of idea, and we'll work with Brett to bring that in front of you, and we can have that kind of a discussion. If it goes to preliminary, we need to get down into the weeds of how's the stormwater going to run, how are the roads going to work, what does the streetscape look like, all that kind of stuff.
So I know I came a few minutes late, so I'm not sure if I missed something.
I don't think you did, Dick.
Okay, so I guess I'm a little confused with your point that it's a drastic change, because yes, the light industrial was removed, and I would be asking on a future build out, where would that light industrial be moving to? Not that it's, I'm not ready at this point to say, oh yeah, let's do away with it. So I would want to know where in the rest of that development, what was being given up somewhere else, where the light industrial was going to be moved to. But beyond that, I mean, trying to look at the old plan and the new plan.
There was a community space because that building could have had 28 units. So there was some open space that would be associated.
But not in that development area, right? I mean,
Right,
there
just
was
to
no.
the edge, it was right
Right here.
there.
Across the street.
Oh,
Okay, and it's a big open field right now.
yeah.
Is it accessible and usable and?
I mean, that could be required, right, until, so this, to me, this looks like phase one of a phase three or something like that, of a three-phase build-out. I would presume that requirements could be placed until phase two and phase three are built out, that some of that unspoken for area be maintained or provided in a way that would provide green space, at least temporarily, until that's available.
I guess one of the problems, from my perspective, with that analysis is we don't have any significant guarantee at this point that there's going to be further build-out. And so I think we have to look at this project as a project that's self-contained, and it may never be built beyond that because there may be constraints on the environment that do not allow it. So I don't think we can anticipate that anything else is going to get built, given the existing facts as we know them.
I would concur, but then couldn't that open area require for this phase, that open area have some facilities put into it, some green space facilities, not just a rough field that can't be used? And so, with the idea that if phase two or whatever further phases were developed, that area would be sacrificed and redesigned in some other place. So I agree, just leaving it an unfinished field seems inappropriate if we're looking at this as like a phase one. But I would think at this time we could also be looking to try to have some plan, some recreational plan, I guess, for that area, as opposed to just being a blank rough field.
And I guess maybe this goes back to kind of chicken-egg analysis. Should this be done at sketch plan or preliminary plat review? And it seems to me like we're asking preliminary plat review to undertake very extensive revisions that probably should be dealt with in a sketch plan concept.
I guess I would ask what would come back different in a sketch plan if you were still thinking of a three-phase development.
Well, I guess, I don't want to make Brett spend any more money than he has to, and maybe you can throw in your 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to tell you the truth, I mean, you know, we could be talking about a complete redesign. I mean, I'll throw it out there. I mean, obviously, we've gone through a lot with this, and I've spent a lot of money up to this point already. There's no question about that. Anybody who's familiar with this business knows that you don't get to this point without spending a lot of money. But with that being said, you know, it is you know, this project or this parcel is designed for a certain amount of density. And I think that, you know, I think what we've proposed is a good plan. With that being said, you know, chances are, although we sit here and say that there may not be any sewer or we're never gonna find any water, the chances are that that's probably not going to be the case. So whatever we end up designing in this phase is going to need to basically be able to be added onto. And I don't, you know, I think, you know, and that happens in lots of projects. And this is I think anything that we come back through, if we go back to sketch, you know, it is still going to be a requirement to have a master plan for the entire project, which is going to include areas in this site that are not going to be built right away, may never be built right away. But I think good land planning is going to require us to plan this site as if we will have sewer someday, or we will have water someday. So, you know, a revised plan of this might look a little bit different, but I think for the most part, the road network and open spaces and things that have been designed in this probably will not change drastically. Because of the fact that you are looking for that west side connector up to Haystack, to the other parcel. So that road's pretty much where that road's gonna be, unless suddenly the town says they no longer want that road to connect the two properties.
But this proposal is not anticipating building that road, right?
At this point, there's no reason to build that road.
Right.
But you wouldn't put the road in over here and then someday say, well, we're gonna move it over here.
Right, no, right.
So this is the logical place to have it, because that's where this is designed, and Haystack has their design over here that we worked with them, and their road is over here. Plus, there was a lot of discussions about it coming up through here, and we decided, you know, collectively, that wasn't a great place for it.
The only thing, I know we talked so long about the light industrial space, but that it did kind of have a match. It's important that there is some future space for that, and it did have a match more there next to a commercial building and multi-residential building, rather than being placed inside of the more denser neighborhood. And that might be not leaving, and maybe I just can't creatively think of the next phase, but it seems like it's not leaving as much of an option for that.
Well, the one thing that I said about this is that, you know, chances are this is bigger than it needs to be, and so is this building. So now, you know, as we look into this further, and this may get smaller, and this may get smaller, suddenly you have more room in that light industrial use, which we very quickly said, oh, we'll just put the stormwater pond here, because that just, it works very quickly. Like I said, this all came about a week and a half ago through some emails from Alex to say, hey, does this work for you?
Yeah, my opener was, I'm gonna recommend they deny this again. Do you wanna propose something else so you don't get a denial? That was my opener, just so we know exactly where my, you know, where I was going with that. Brett, the stormwater pond, your engineer said, yeah, we could probably do something there to absorb the runoff from that project, but there is a grade issue, right? The road that would go in next to the Lasher house would be at the grade of Farmall Drive, and that stormwater pond's probably at a similar grade. You wouldn't be able to get your runoff to it, would you?
I might not be able to, like I said, this was all done very, very quickly, and so this may not work, and we may need to have a different location for this. Pretty much the same as, at sketch plan, when this was approved, we didn't really have a specific location for the stormwater pond.
Well, you knew it would be out there.
We knew it would be out
You
there.
just didn't know where exactly in
Yeah.
that westerly area. I'm just saying that from a return to sketch standpoint, the concept for this smaller phase could change a fair amount if that runoff, which has always been an issue brought up by the residents of Creekside, can't be addressed in that stormwater pond expansion location, just due to the grades.
And even for this abbreviated phase, the reason we're not looking at the stormwater being out where it was originally planned during sketch is because that would have to be an area that's filled prior to being able to put the stormwater pond.
That's how you explained it to me, right? That to have to put in all of that fill and infrastructure to take advantage of the westerly stormwater location would break the project. It couldn't absorb that cost. So the stormwater would need to go somewhere more proximate, at least for this phase. I don't know that that's necessarily the right location. Maybe it could go somewhere to the west of this phase and then get ripped up and moved. But like Brett said, time is, there's only so much of it.
So pros and cons here. I take it there's a benefit to staying at preliminary because, at least from Brett's perspective, because he can continue to pursue water and sewer, right? If
That's one benefit. The other is that once you're at preliminary, you're vested in the regulations that were in place at the time you applied.
yeah, but those haven't particularly changed
No,
pertaining to this.
But they're going to. The planning commission is
Well, yeah, but
determined to
that's-
make some modifications to the.
Some months away, certainly.
It is.
So
It is.
my point is, if we say no, Brett, this is too big a change for continue to stay in preliminary, and there's too many unknowns and, issues that need to be addressed, that would probably be at sketch. Nothing would prevent Brett from coming back, 1st of December and saying, here's my sketch plan, right?
Right, yes.
And
could be back right back
conceptually,
to a preliminary stage without too much delay.
conceptually, we're gonna get to the floodplain issue. I'm not sure how much of this first phase is it requires the floodplain filling, but and somewhat of a separate subject, but still very much pertinent to this. But conceptually, apart from that, this I can imagine sketch or whatever that embodies this first part of the development, not having any fatal flaws, which is really what sketch plan's all about. It's to my mind 6 of one, half dozen another, in that you can stay in preliminary if we feel like it and deal with all those issues, or be in the same exact discussion except calling it sketch. I don't know.
There is a cost differential that I'm sure Brett's been doing this long as he knows about it, but I'm gonna just remind him, we're gonna hold your feet to the fire with a preliminary application for all the details, and Mitch is gonna be looking at your stormwater plan, cause he designed your first pond, so you're gonna.
Does this pond work with us right now? Do you remember that part?
So, all I'm saying is that you're gonna have a substantial outlay of professional resources to stay at preliminary, whereas if you drop back to sketch, you're still gonna spend money, as you know, because you spent it on the first sketch, but it's not gonna require the same level of detailed review. So if you think that there's a chance that this could be substantially revised, footprints and location of the stormwater pond, it might behoove you to go back to sketch and not waste your money on preliminary.
Didn't we say that you're not vested after sketch in anything? Isn't that the
The
law?
lawyers have told us that you vest when you make your preliminary plat application. Yeah,
When you make it?
when you make it. So Brett's vested currently.
So that's what he risks.
Right, he'll lose that and we'll have to play by the current set of regulations. But as Ted said, there hasn't been much change since he applied.
Yeah, and given where, I don't know what stage the planning commission's at, but it hasn't been rolled out at all.
No,
So,
in
you know,
reality,
6 months.
Yeah, in reality,
right?
it's any change is
So-
probably 6 months
so-
away. But you
so-
have two planning commissioners, so they can tell you. what
So I
they
don't
think.
see anything changing in terms of being vested in the regulations.
But the other thing though is for sketch, he wouldn't spend the money on engineering, on the stormwater and all that, at
No.
sketch anyways, so.
No, that's why I'm saying a drop back to sketch could be
What
a
about
way to
his-
save
Well,
money
you
on
have
a
to figure out-
conceptual level review that could change.
You'd have to figure out that, back of the envelope that it works, though. If it doesn't, that changes your sketch plan.
What about being in line for water and sewer?
You need a sketch plan approval for that, so getting a denial would take that, you wouldn't have access to that until the next sketch plan approval.
So you lose your spot in line.
Yeah. But like I explained, water is the determining factor this year, under the current allocation policy, which runs for 1 year. And I don't know of another project in the village core that could take that water capacity away from this project. That there just isn't anything. Hannaford's already accounted for, the Norris project is accounted for, Green Street's now online. There isn't a whole lot else to suck up a lot of water unless Frost Brewery decides to really get, even more serious.
So just to bring these two applications together a little bit, how much of this is in the floodplain fill area?
Well, I can certainly elaborate on that. The floodplain regulations in the town, and the study that we did, which you guys based your approval on,
Yep.
has not changed.
Mhm.
So those regulations in the town as far as filling the floodplain, and the study that we did in regards to Patrick Brook, and improving that there was no downstream impact from the filling that we were proposing, that has all remained the same. The one thing that has changed at the state level, okay, and I've had some discussions with some new engineers on this, is that I don't want to oversimplify things, but essentially what it is you have to create an offset. So if you're filling a foot here, if you're filling, a cubic yard here, you got to offset it with a cubic yard somewhere else. So by reducing the retaining capacity, you have to create that capacity in another location. So that is in essence what the state regulations state at this point. I mean, that is essentially what they did in Middlebury with the new office complex. They filled the heck out of it, but if you drive all around it, there's offsets. And so that's in essence what they did.
Offset is dig a basin?
Basically, that's what they did. Yeah. So additional, because of that, even though we are not, creating an impact with what we're filling, and the study showed that, we would still need to basically have an offset here. What that specific offset would be is, we calculated the total amount of fill that was gonna be going in the floodplain. But the way the regulations actually work is that it's not the total amount of fill, it's the amount of fill that actually gets you to that. So if the floodplain level is at 330 and you're at 329, it's that 1 foot. It's not if you go to 332.
Yep.
So.
But you can't fit, go ahead.
This isn't about Phil. This is back to the other sketch versus preliminary plat. If you came back at sketch, would you divide it out distinctly into 3 phases?
We would work with staff to basically have it designed, accordingly. And I think, I guess I have another Alex, so I have this is maybe more of a legal question, but there's a preliminary plat application in front of you,
Right.
but technically the sketch plan is still valid.
Right, you submitted the preliminary plat application prior to the expiration of that, so you're in the preliminary plat review now. And have been for over a year.
If I withdrew the preliminary plat and requested that the initial sketch plan still be active, can I automatically go back to sketch plan?
Go back to sketch plan.
Because I have a sketch plan that's
So,
And
so,
submit a new preliminary
a
plat.
revised sketch.
so procedurally, they need to rule on this application.
Unless
The preliminary plat application.
Unless right now I withdraw it.
Sure. Right, you could do that at any time, it's your application, absolutely. You could withdraw it tonight and give us a sketch plan tomorrow.
Or
And we-
technically a revised sketch plan.
Well, it would be a new sketch plan, you wouldn't have that sketch plan approval from before anymore. That would be done, this application has hereby been withdrawn, you'd be starting over, but there'd be the context of what was previously approved.
I don't know when the sketch will be.
You can't withdraw.
You can't retain a sketch plan and withdraw the application that it's based on at the same time.
You can't withdraw the preliminary application and keep
And
your
keep
sketch
the
plan?
sketch.
No. No, it's
That would be
one,
entertaining for you.
it's one application, you're just at a successive phase of it, so
Well-
you can't separate them.
I mean, it doesn't make much difference if you come back, if you retain your sketch plan and then come back with a revised sketch plan. It's the same review as if you came back with a new sketch plan. I guess.
Yeah, but I'm looking at it from other procedural legal.
Oh, okay,
standpoints.
Talk to your attorney.
Yeah, exactly, but unfortunately he's not here, otherwise I would ask him right now.
Yeah.
Can I borrow that laser pointer for a second? Ted's question. So this was in your packet, but the lines are hard to see, so I'm gonna trace them for you.
Yep.
So this is the project, and Ted, you said how much of it is in the flood hazard area?
And how much of the?
So here's the flood hazard line. So just to orient everyone, this is 116.
Yeah.
Here's existing Farmall Drive.
Yep.
There's the Lasher house. So this is Kaylee Way,
Yep.
and this is the reduced version that's been, we're
Yep.
talking about.
And everything to the right of Cayley Way has been built.
This is all built, yep.
So everything to the left is new.
Even this new building here, it's all
Yeah,
done.
almost done.
Fountain's not in yet. Here's the flood hazard line.
Mm-hmm. Anything-
Above it. is
Anything
not.
to the north of that line, above the line on the screen, is in the flood hazard area. So
Uh-huh.
what's proposed is probably about, 60-40 or 70-30. This portion here, this section of road, this building, the stormwater pond, the bulk of the parking area is all in the flood hazard zone and would require a permit to place fill.
Yeah.
And this area here, this portion of the extension of Farmall and these buildings is out of the flood hazard area and does not require your permission to place a bunch of
Yep.
fill there.
And the elevations, I mean, it gets more and more fill to get to flood. Is that line one elevation?
Yeah.
That line that
Yeah.
goes through A there?
No, it's, well,
This-
not
this-
completely.
This is a particular elevation, but the flood, it's tied to the 100-year flood, and that level does change as you move
Oh,
along
depending on where
Patrick
you
Brook
are,
and
yeah,
LaPlatte,
yeah,
so it's not one consistent elevation, but it is the 100-year flood
Okay.
line.
Mhm.
But you cannot put any fill in there unless he gets DRB final approval on the project.
So the way that you structured your initial approval for fill in the flood hazard area was you said, Brett, you can fill all of this, we're gonna give you that approval, but you can't place any of that fill until we finish the subdivision review and grant you the final approval for the project.
Right.
And that was a way to basically say, yeah, it makes sense, go ahead and spend $200,000 on engineering for a subdivision, but we're not gonna let you place the fill until everything's been worked out, because there were drainage issues and all the rest of that. That's how you did it the first time. That approval's expired, so unlike the preliminary plat application that sort of you left in limbo for the last year, Brett has no approval or vesting or anything with regard to the fill you previously approved in the flood hazard zone. That's a new application.
So do we know if if we did this phase, it would just fill in that section and it wouldn't affect anything else?
Ask him.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Conceptually, yes. Without actually,
So I guess that means, this area here, well, in the flood zone, it would be this.
Well, and we were gonna deal with that, below community, that community open space,
but that's outside.
elevation issue. Well, that's out of the floodplain anyway. It doesn't-
Yeah.
So, the Kinney Drug Store and the building that you've been building most recently, and the ones along, to the south there, those are all on elevated portions of land that,
Well, yes, but that was, you have to understand that all of that was approved and built for the most part before McBroom went in here and did the analysis to determine the floodway, and, cause the original, show them the FEMA is
Right, so FEMA, our Federal Emergency Management Agency, has maps to show the flood hazard area is actually up here. But when Brett proposed this project with Kinney's and all of that, Act 250 said, you need to map the floodway, and the FEMA data was not specific enough, so Brett had to hire a
This was
hydro.
after Kinney was approved. Yeah.
Yeah, anyways, that's true. Had to hire an engineer to figure that out. In the process, that engineer determined that FEMA's mapping was not right, and the flood hazard area was more, occupied more area
I see.
than what FEMA anticipated, or felt, or what had mapped.
And so was that portion of the initial development elevated?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
It's-
yeah.
It's the same elevation as 116.
Okay.
But actually, Farmall Drive is not, but the road, the original Farmall Drive coming into Creekside, that's essentially at the elevation where it more or less was, it slowly dropped down. But then, yeah, everything
Yeah,
around the kitty side.
It's largely a level pad here. There's not a lot of elevation change from 116 to Kaylee's Way. Where you see that change is in these front yards on this corner, and there was a lot of discussion about that building when it was approved, because people were concerned in the neighborhood about the elevation profile of that building being up so high. The need to change the elevation to get back to the creekside elevation was gonna happen in phase 2. And a lot of it, as I remember, was gonna happen right in here. So that, this portion of the road was gonna be at one elevation, and this was gonna be at a substantially lower elevation, potentially with this building having
Step down.
2 stories on the east side and 3 stories on the west side in order to make up that elevation change.
Yeah, but that portion of right next to the physical therapy, I mean, that portion of the existing road, that's not a level road.
No, so it climbs,
Yeah,
so it climbs from here up
Yes,
to
Yeah.
what is essentially a level elevation from here to here
okay.
and across all of this. But yeah, there's a substantial elevation gain, well, substantial, several feet, right in there. And again, that's why this building is pretty important, just like this one, because there's gotta be a step down that happens in this area. This is all the fun weeds that we will get into if we ever get to, a real preliminary plat application with engineered buildings and,
So just to clarify though, the fill that went into the first phase there where the Kinney and everything is, that was not to bring it up out of the floodplain because
well,
at that time.
my recollection is that there was an approval for that. And it was long enough ago now, I'd have to look baok
If you look at the FEMA map, it would
2013 is
say,
when we did the study. Kinney Drugs was approved
Yeah,
7 years ago.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but I have to look back. I don't think I have those files
I
copied
think
on
we
my
did a
laptop.
conditional floodplain.
We did do yes, I know you did a conditional use approval for fill in the flood hazard zone for this area, for phase 1.
But it was off of the old FEMA, it was off the old FEMA map.
So it was minimal.
It may have been, I thought
but
that.
why would we? I mean, according to that
Yeah,
that
no,
plot,
I-
FEMA says that's not a floodplain.
I thought that Myron McBroom had done some initial work. In fact, they did. So remember, they,
I don't remember that part.
they did 2 reports for you, Brett. They did one for Hinesburg Center Phase 1, and then they did a second one for your conditional use approval in 2013 for all of this. And they referenced their initial, I think, 2010 study for this. I remember, because at the time, they did draw this additional line, so you did need to grant approval for fill for this project, but the elevation change is like inches. So it is in the flood hazard zone, but the amount of fill required to get anything out of that zone was really small. It was volumetrically, it was a very small amount of fill to elevate it up and above. Whereas I think as you move further in this direction, you know, we'd get into the tens of thousands of cubic yards of fill that are gonna be in the flood hazard zone. It wasn't quite so significant here.
The further you go away from 116, it slopes dramatically, right?
Right.
That's the fundamental issue, is 116 is at a certain plane. Creekside was built below that plane. I would say, based upon the concentric circle maps out of the hydrology reports, about 8 to 10 feet below 116 level plane, right? So that's where Creekside is. The community open space is even further below that because it's kind of like a swimming pool. And that was exhibited in the 2013 issue where we had a whole bunch of rain, and that all got filled in, right? Kinney Drugs and all that first development is level with 116. So now, how do you reconcile the different planes and the different residential and commercial on a span of property that slopes and it's a flood?
Right, and this was all
Right.
discussed at sketch and was gonna be part of the preliminary plat review. And again, a lot of that elevation change was gonna be happening in this block with stepping down of buildings and then getting this road to slope back to the Farmall Drive elevation as you get to this side of the project. So, Dennis,
Farmall Drive was
can I,
raised up.
can I just ask you to help Dawn and have people who Dawn doesn't know identify themselves
Yes.
so she can
Oh.
get them in the minutes?
Thank you.
I think we've had
Sorry, Greg Tomczyk.
Greg and Kyle. Did you speak, Kyle?
Not significant in that.
Dawn's pretty good.
No, he
She
talked
might-
about Halloween.
Kyle Bostwick, if you don't know Kyle.
Thank
Five,
you.
522 people.
Right now I have you marked as checkered shirt.
Great.
So-
You call me
Could be worse,
522.
Kyle. Could be worse.
All right, so,
I had all my questions that I have answered.
okay, everybody else? So I'm gonna open it up to the public.
Are we talking what part of the agenda?
No, just the preliminary plat. But
So the purpose of this meeting is for the DRB to decide if we're gonna proceed with the preliminary plat. So, we don't really get into the guts of this project,
No
just
weeds.
state your name and,
Your business.
And if you'd like the laser pointer, you're
Yeah.
welcome. I'll bring it.
So what kind of input are you looking
You wanna be
for?
the runner?
If you don't want to get into the weeds, right? Because my issue was related, as I said earlier, relative to flood, water, flood storage, how the whole water balance is going to work out in a very different set of development plans. And if you piecemeal it, it gets even worse, I think, right? Because you can't react to things as well as you think you're going to.
well, I think Hinesburg's come to I think we've all decided, or most of us have decided, that phasing is the only way we're gonna be able to make these projects work. Just with our sewer and our water, and I think most people are looking for phasing. I know I'm one of them.
So I may have missed it, but who gets first dibs, right? Like BlackRock, right? There's another construction.
That's up to the select board how they're allocating.
So
the
they
sewer.
decide the allocation?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
They
don't
put it
decide
in the
that.
buckets already.
Thank
Okay.
God we don't have to decide all.
Yeah.
And there's really no, the only water that they, like Alex pointed out, if you look at the sheet, there's essentially two buckets. Of the water that is still available is approximately 11,000 gallons.
Yeah.
5,000 they put in some special bucket that they put in their back pocket for special projects. And then 5,000 gallon is for this area, the village core zone, which does not include BlackRock, does not include NRG. And then there's another, the remaining is approximately 1,100 gallons, like Alex talked about, which is for some the industrial zone or whatever that may be.
So BlackRock is under their own,
There's no water for BlackRock in their zone,
okay.
or for NRG.
If they decided to piecemeal, then they could get some? Is that the way it
Well, it
works?
says only 5,000 gallons.
No,
which,
no, there's zero capacity in their zone.
Well,
that's right.
There's
There's
about
all-
1,100 gallons per day.
Yeah.
Basically, those projects can't go anywhere.
Because
unless
they
we-
want to build them as one, as
Unless we
opposed to
wanna-
a piecemeal,
They're all
right? That's the
different,
problem.
they're different zone.
They don't have the.
Because they're part of the sewer service and water service area, has been allocated a very small amount of water.
Oh, so
This
your
is-
different areas
this
get
This
is-
it.
area has been
1,000
allocated
gallons and give them
more.
about 5 units.
This is village core, right?
Yes, it's at
So-
the very edge
Which is
of the
different than
village
those
core.
two developments, which are expansion zone, village
Gotcha.
expansion zones.
Actually, the boundary is.
Right there.
The brook.
Yeah.
Do we have anybody else? State your
Hi.
name, please.
Bob Hyams. Just question, with respect to the water, seems to be sort of a fluid situation there.
That was nice.
So the water that's coming, the water, the wells that are gonna be drilled, or that are in the process of being drilled, are those allocated already? I mean, do we know which buckets those are going into?
No, not at all. So the drilling that BlackRock is doing in collaboration with the town to try to find a more water supply, no deals has been struck. But the general understanding is that BlackRock is also going to come back with a phased approach of their project. And if they strike water, they would like some assurance from the town that they're going to get enough for their first phase, and the rest of the balance will just go into the town's, kitty to get allocated to whoever, whether it's BlackRock or this project or NRG. So the details of that haven't been worked out, and there's no agreements yet on that. BlackRock is basically fronting money to do this exploration without a guarantee of anything. But it's their property, and that's sort of the idea behind it, anyways.
So if you had to, I don't know, maybe you can't even guess, but do you have could you guess as to when you will have results from this current round of drilling?
Well, since the drilling's actually happening now, or has happened in the last week, I think we'll have I want to say we'll have a flavor of whether the well actually is going to work or not. Today's November 1st, probably by the end of the month, maybe sooner.
So then the water situation for this development could change.
Except there's still.
Well, the problem is we're only going to get an idea of what might be possible by the end of the month. To actually prove that water supply out and then bring it online, that's a year. That's probably 2 years out, at best case scenario. And we'll likely have to go before the voters for a bond. I mean, there's just a lot of uncertainty with regard to the water. Yeah. And for all I know, the well that they drilled, even though it sounded like there was some preliminary positive thinking or results, maybe it won't pan out, and we'll be having a drill on the Lyman property next, and that won't happen until next year. I mean, it's still
Okay.
fluid.
I mean, my well serves 3 houses, most wells serve 1 house. In theory, this well that is being drilled could serve hundreds of houses within
Right.
town.
Eric told us this afternoon that he's really looking for a well that's 200 gallons per minute. So that's not a little well. That's a lot. That's a very high flow well. So it's not a guarantee that we're gonna find one, or that the one that they punched in the ground this last week is gonna work.
Have you thought about the community open space at Creekside? Plenty of water there.
Not this year. Pretty dry this year, right?
No,
And what's your name?
that's not true.
Really? That's not true. The driest summer in 20 years, and
That's
it was
the
still
concern.
a pond.
So Dennis, you want comments just on those 3 buildings, and we're not talking about anything with regards to the entire plan at this point, correct? Or understanding that we want to stay above the weeds.
You-
I got a lot of weeds questions.
Well,
but-
you're welcome to, in general, I think, offer your opinion of what's missing if you just consider those 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Checkered shirt, 522. Okay, Kyle. I'm glad that a couple of these points have been brought up, and I agree that we do need to look at this in phasing. But I also think that we need to, if you take some of the phasing as an example, we did the phasing there, and what was left, even though it was optic, was a mound of dirt and dumpsters and just garbage left everywhere. And there's no thought, everything is in a vacuum. Yes, we're phasing, but it's just kind of like, okay, we're done. We'll just leave everything here until we figure out the water. And that's not who we are. You come into town and it looks ridiculous. The other point is, how these phases and how they're built and the puzzle pieces that go together. I'm concerned as well that, we've got one real opportunity to create this downtown that we all want. And to me, I look at that road that goes to the east-west corridor, and I look at that block, and I think, there is between that road and 116, I would love us to take advantage of that as far as we can towards St. George and make that an area that we're going to be able to take advantage of the village growth. And if we miss an opportunity to put light industrial there, where are we going to put it? To me, there is a lot of residential here, candidly, because it's easy to build and it's easy to sell and it's probably great for the developer. But from a town standpoint, I think we're missing a huge opportunity to take that property and create that commerce, that retail sector. I would love Hinesburg to be an area that, you can wake up, you can wake up in Hinesburg, you can go to work in Hinesburg, you can go home in Hinesburg. And if we just create these areas where all we've got is houses everywhere, we're just missing. Everybody's going to go to Williston to get something. They're going to go to Burlington to get something, and we're missing that opportunity. If you look at phasing, okay, in hindsight, I would maybe challenge that the thought that went into the elevation of that first block was uncalculated. It wasn't thought out correctly, because we have a huge issue now with runoff that if we really put all these puzzle pieces together, I don't know if we would have had it. I don't know if it should have been built at the grade that it's at right now, because as dry as the summer's been, there were times where you couldn't mow the community open space. It's really wet. And unfortunately with this property, between promises that have been made that have not been followed through on, timelines that have been promised to be made that have not been followed through on, water mains that are built too high. All these wonderful little mistakes are oh shucks. But what I'm worried about is having a living room full of water because we didn't think this thing out correctly. We are at a tipping point right now with where to put this water. And we're at a tipping point, and I just don't have the assurance between the driver of this project and the oversight that if it ends up where I'm flooded, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? And I haven't heard anything about what the plan is. So a couple things. There's a bunch of things in there. One is we've got a great opportunity to use this space. I'd love to see it used in something that's going to help our community grow. And then the second is I still have not heard a plan, and I'm not really we don't even know. Right now we've heard tonight that the stormwater pond could go here, could go there. Boy, we better get this right. We really better figure out how to deal with this water, because if we don't, I'm going to need some help with wet dry vacs from everybody.
So you feel like that will change if we go back to sketch?
I don't know what I don't know what we do. I just, as far as these three buildings, to me the three buildings, we're missing an opportunity to take that really good real estate and do something that's going to help Hinesburg grow. I don't know if a 22 unit residential house, I don't know if all that residential is the best use of that space right now. Because if it's residential now, where are we going to put the other stuff that we really want? Where are we going to put the jobs?
And I guess, so Alyssa Lasher. So I guess I would also piggyback on what Kyle's saying, and I would also just caution you to think about what Sarah said when she said something about that light industrial and how that piece is now missing. And so yes, there might be guarantees that it's going to be coming in the next phase, but again, we don't even have a guarantee that that next phase will ever happen. So just, thinking ahead of time, thinking ahead of, what you want to approve or consider, you know, promises aren't always kept and things don't always pan out.
How much of Creekside is in that flood hazard area?
The commerce, the
I don't think, well, I don't.
community open space is wet all the time.
Where's
And
the water
But according
coming
to
from?
that,
Should
it's
we-
not
so it
actually
flows
It's
down
coming-
Frederick, right, and then it rolls off Kinney's to some degree,
Do
and
you
then
want
you've
the
got,
pointer?
you've got the berm that got built up 4 or 5 years ago, right? And it's got these
Alex,
small
we should be
culverts.
clear, there's a difference between where the flood hazard zone is, which is when we have a huge event and the
And the
LaPlatte
flood.
and Patrick
100-year
Brook
flood.
literally flood.
We're
Right.
dealing with a man-made problem.
This is not what, this is not the issue in that community open space. That open space is not in the flood hazard area, and according to these maps, it never was. This issue is a runoff issue, and where water that before any of this, before all of your homes were built, all that water sort of slowly percolated west. and
Because
a
of the
little bit
slope,
north,
right? Because of the slope.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And so this is an issue of now that, you know, Creekside was built, and then Hinesburg Center Phase 1 was built, and probably most importantly, that water sewer line was built by the Bissonnettes to serve the development off Shelburne Falls Road. That created a dam that, as water wanted to move to the west, it gets stopped there, and there's literally one small culvert that allows passage. So we need to fix that.
And that was a mistake that was made. I mean, it
Right.
shouldn't have been built that way. Shouldn't have been built that way. It
Well-
was built too high.
Where was
No,
the
no, no,
oversight in that
the-
sense?
It's not that it was built too high, it's that not enough passage was allowed underneath it. There shouldn't be one culvert, there should be several, or they should be larger. The reason that the
And then
berm is as high as it is wasn't because of a mistake, it was because the engineer said you need that much overburden to prevent the pipes underneath it from freezing.
But I will,
And shifting.
I will challenge you, Alex, in the fact that the water line is at a point right now where you cannot dig down and put sub-base when you're gonna put that new road in. So now that road is going to have to be elevated even more, which will cause more runoff, which will, again, all of those, where D is, right there, all those 9 building lots, those are going to be higher than my house right there because of a man-made issue. And that's where I don't have faith in what we're dealing with
Yeah,
right
and
now.
so we probably shouldn't go there, but I'm not convinced you're right about that. And I think we need
Okay.
actual engineering
Okay.
to demonstrate what those elevations would be. But you live very much closer to this than I do, so I respect your.
And the other thing I want to point out is that, you know, this is the area that's having issues but, you know, here's the community space. Even before that was built, this whole section was very wet anyway. And there's a section right here in this area that can never be mowed. It's always wet. And that's not even close to where it's coming in here. So there's obviously some issue happening in the middle too.
Yeah, and that may be partly runoff from the backyards of Creekside
Well,
that come
yeah,
into that property.
Exactly, impervious.
Most of Creekside was filled when the neighborhood was built, Brett knows that. But that area wasn't. It was designed to just slope back down to the original grade, so that may be a function of that more
If I
than
can add just one
anything
thing,
else.
there is a very high water table in the entire area. So you would dig down a few feet below or actually even a foot below, a lot of what was existing over here, you're gonna have water. And as Alex was said, the rest of the Creekside has been built up. This area here is still on that original area, so you get a good rain event. It does get water, and generally it either flows overland or tries to infiltrate. And being that it is a very flat area, it does sometimes take a little bit of time. And it's just the nature of
And
it.
it certainly doesn't flow overland to the west. It comes down into that space, so
So-
it's not going anywhere.
To get back to the issue that we're talking about tonight, it's a process issue. All these concerns are going to be addressed in some forum and at some stage. It's either going to be preliminary plat or sketch. So we as a board have to decide whether we're going to do this at sketch or preliminary plat.
I think there's enough unknowns, anticipated changes, and other issues that we ought to deal with it at a sketch review. Or else we'll just be making preliminary, a sketch for a few meetings. That's why I said it on the six of one, half dozen another, but properly, these are sketch issues, whether we have light industrial as a requirement, what the size of the buildings, how many units there are, what green space is, or recreation space or whatever is gonna get built along with this phase. There's many things that, and it does have to stand alone, because the rest of it may not be built. We can call it, the rest of it, the conceptual plan, but it's very dependent upon water sewer. It's some years away, I'm gathering, before there's water and sewer to allocate, or water to allocate anyways, and there you won't get sewer if you don't have water. So I guess I would lean towards
Is that a motion?
reviewing this at scale.
Well, there's water right now.
Is that a motion?
Well, yeah, there's water right now for a very limited part of this, and no, and some years later you probably will get some more. I think the water problem is solvable, but it's not tomorrow. It's not 6 months. It's a couple of years before that's developed and ready to go, ready to allocate rather. I guess
But I also think Brett was trying to retrofit into what was available. He may not even want, these buildings as to be the ones that you build, except they happen to be in the part of the map that was closest to what you've already built.
Well, part of that is there are resources there. You can't afford to go put a house all the way out to the west.
No,
Yeah,
I know,
right.
but they
Next-
happen
next
to
to
be.
Kyle's.
Exactly, but they happen to be
Actually, I could probably build one right
the places that, the buildings that were in the place that was most local to what you had already developed.
Well, I think any redesign is gonna see something similar to that. And that's those, maybe not those building types, but certainly the location.
Yeah, but maybe not the types.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we not continue the preliminary plat review, deny the preliminary plat application without prejudice to file a new sketch plan.
Do I have a second?
You want to direct staff to draft that? Is that kind of where we're going? Because you need to
Sure.
put your reasoning in black and white, I think.
It goes without saying.
Yeah, sorry.
Do I have a second?
Sorry, so if it is without prejudice, do you actually have to submit a denial? I guess.
Yeah, to have a written decision regardless, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that can be appealable.
I would second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
Want to talk about floodplain?
Does that matter?
Well, it's a separate application, you need to deal with it, unless the applicant would like to withdraw it and resubmit, with the revised sketch plan, that would make life easy for some of us. So maybe all of us, I don't know, what do you think, Brett?
Well, I mean, we're kind of, we did this before where we applied we received conditional use. We received conditional use to fill the floodplain before we actually had a sketch plan application.
Right.
And this board approved that application in that order before.
Yeah, with the condition that none of it be done until, and to the extent needed for the development that ultimately got approved, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And really, that was a chicken and egg issue. It didn't make sense for the community and the board and you to spend time designing a project that couldn't exist because the flood area couldn't be filled.
Correct. So I'm here tonight that I'd be essentially requesting it's the same scenario.
I suppose, but if you are gonna come back at sketch with a substantially reduced project, then your request for how much fill you want to place in the flood hazard area will also be substantially less, and you may gain it may be an easier review for you, because some concerns have been brought up on this issue.
Yeah, but the
that-
review really should be, the conditional use request for the floodplain is essentially the same as what it was previously approved as, and supporting data is the same as well. So the conditions have not really changed that the original approval was based upon.
You're right about that. I mean, none of the regulations haven't changed, you know, the information hasn't changed. There's been a change in state policy that we're trying to work through. But
And
my point
guess
is only that you got approved for fill for this whole thing. If you're gonna come back with not the whole thing, then this board shouldn't be approving fill for something that you're not actually gonna develop.
But that sketch plan though, my question to you asked, Mike, that sketch plan though, will be in essence a master plan, will it not?
Right, it'll be a master plan with one piece called out as what you're gonna bring all the way through to final, and the rest of it conceptual.
So would this board, on that application of conditional use for filling the floodplain, when they again basically be looking at the entire parcel as a single aggregate as the entire master plan? Because if you're gonna approve the sketch plan and the master plan, you can't say that we're gonna let you fill over here, but not the rest of the master plan conceptually that you may or may not build something.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that, and it makes some sense to me, but I think you heard from the board the last time they approved this in 2013, the conditional use for flood hazard fill, that it was an approval with the understanding that it would be adapted to whatever the final design of the project was. And the thought then was that the final design of the project would be the entire project. If the final design of your new sketch plan is gonna be just those 3 buildings or that smaller area, then the conditional use approval for fill beyond that, you know, they're not gonna be able to, that can't be a forever approval for something that might never happen, you know what I mean? It's gotta flow from what you're actually gonna do. Cause these conditional use approvals expire after a year, you can move them for one more, and there's a timing issue
So if you
there.
didn't build out the whole thing, part of the plan would expire, or if the plan,
No, the plan wouldn't expire, but the conditional use to fill it to support the plan might.
Right.
unless, if he filled part of it, if he filled part of the floodplain,
Yep.
does that put enough of the conditional use into place that
Right.
it stays forever?
We would need
open?
an attorney to help us with that question, and my recommendation, without having talked to an attorney yet, would be don't let that happen. Don't let an approval for a large amount of fill happen if the design for the development of what's happening on that fill hasn't been worked out. It might not be for years. Like, snap it to the area that's actually going to be developed and let the rest of it come back later. Regulations change, you know, community zoning changes.
Well, no,
Brett
that's
could
not-
get.
That's my fear.
You should be a little afraid of that. So what I'm saying is Brett could come back for a reduced phase project and get approved and build it. And that would be fine, and you give flood hazard approval for that and everything. Let's say 3 years later, the community decides that we're gonna revise the zoning for the rest of the property. We need to be able to make that decision as a community, and we don't want an old DRB decision hanging out there that allows there to be this huge platform of fill in an area that we suddenly zoned that's, you know, not gonna have any development on it.
We granted an approval in 2013. That expired. The present application is tied to an application that has been denied now, is going back to sketch. I see no reason for us not to kick this back to a first stage review.
You mean deny this application
Yes.
for conditional use?
Yeah, and let it mate up with the subsequent revised sketch plan.
And make it be phased?
And not everybody on the board was around for the discussion. I know Rolf was. I don't know if everyone else here?
So,
Yeah, okay. The discussion on the rationale and the engineering study that was provided that enabled us to vote in favor of allowing that fill. But I agree that the fill ought to be tied to the development. And the development is severely limited, the fill ought to be severely limited, what is approved and proposed and approved.
Any other board members have any other comments?
I did have a question, but you want to, a question from the public there?
All right, I'll open it up to the public.
I guess I just want to make a comment. How can you have a master plan if you don't know in 5 years if you're gonna have water or sewer? So why do a master plan? Why not just look at each phase as you go in itself? How can you make a developer do a master plan?
Because we have to make sure all the phases tie together.
Correct.
Well, it's kind of required, even if it's conceptually difficult.
Yeah, ultimately, the regulations require it, but you're absolutely right about the catch-22. It's difficult, so, you know,
At some point, you gotta
developers gonna
look at
have to
each.
plan for something with the understanding that portions of it may not happen based on infrastructure needs.
Yeah, the part of it that's outside of the, what would be the current proposal, doesn't get a whole lot of, doesn't get all the engineering done, doesn't get all the, it's conceptual master plan. It's not cast, it's
So
not,
in this
it's
case,
actually not approved as a master plan. You still have to come back and, you know, convince us that the next phase works, even though it was part of the master plan.
so conceptually, you could say, all right, we'll fill in that whole area, but we're only working on those 3 buildings. We're only going to allow fill for those 3.
Right.
Which is basically what we said in the original fill approval, was that you'll only fill what you're building out. So my question, I guess, was more, if you have a phase project, and the idea of the town deciding to change its rules at a later date, with a phase project, we approve the whole thing. You know, phases 1, 2, and 3, whatever. So it's not like just because you got through 1 and 2, but you didn't get to 3 yet, and the town changes its mind about density, that now 3 is no longer viable, because, I mean, as I understand it, that whole thing was approved at the time under a certain set of regulations.
Right, so if there was water and sewer, and this project went through to final, just like this, so you approved the entire project, there was some understanding that it would be built in phases, but your final approval was for the entire project, then that would be platted, that would be a subdivision, and yeah, zoning changes wouldn't
So-
affect it in the same way.
So in that regard, if you treated the fill in the same manner, that says, okay, we want to only fill out 1 phase at a time, but at some point we say, oh, you've got phase 1 and 2 done, we can't do anything about your density, but we changed our fill rules. So, no, you can't fill the 3rd phase. That's effectively the same thing as saying you can't do phase 3. So,
Well, so you're gonna need to provide this fill approval for anything that Brett brings all the way through to final on the subdivision side of the coin. So, there won't be a disconnect. We can't let there be a disconnect. Whatever you give approval for, regardless of whether portions of it build out in 2 years and portions build out in 10 years, whatever you grant a final approval for lots and buildings and streets, he's gotta have that fill approval as well.
For the whole thing.
So they match up.
okay.
But again, if Brett comes back for sketch with just this smaller portion, and the rest remains a conceptual master plan like Ted said, then, you know, you would grant the fill approval for that necessary area, and there's no final approval for that conceptual master plan, so that comes at a later date.
Okay, thank you.
Just to ask, because we do have a couple big projects, can a developer come through with a large sketch, not a conceptual, but an actual sketch that is just phased and ask for approval?
Sure.
And then they go through preliminary with the entire project and the final approval
when
says you're gonna build this section in, you know, first and this section second and this, yes, in fact, for Brett's project and the other two big ones, that's what we essentially told all those folks, is that you need to come back with a phased project.
So they could come back with only one part as an actual phase one could be the only part of the project that's fleshed out, and the other, and 2 and 3 are conceptual. Or are we asking for all of them to be part of sketch, not concept?
So, I mean, I think the difference between phasing and a master plan
Is different.
Phasing is you've done all of the
work.
engineering for
Yes.
the whole
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's
Master
what I'm
plan.
asking. What are we? Well, we don't know what Brett.
Sarah, that's up to Brett.
Right.
He's gonna make a
Yeah.
proposal to us. It could be very limited, or it could be big.
Yeah.
In light of the water realities, it's probably gonna be small.
But we could be
But
All
that's his
three of the
decision.
big developers, big development projects are considering coming back to you with a smaller version of what they originally proposed. Because we put them all on notice. You're not gonna get approval for the entire project until there's water. And so they know that if they come back, for example, NRG Systems knows, if they come back for preliminary plat for the same project, they're gonna get a denial. Even if they say, well, we want final proof of the whole project, but we'll do it in phases.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's
is we
still,
can
it's still
deny it.
gonna be a
That's what I was
denial, because there
trying to
isn't
ask.
water for that.
Yes,
But if they
that's
come
what I'm
back and
trying
say, we no longer wanna do the whole thing, we wanna do just one piece of it and take that through to final, and everything else remains conceptual, no vested rights, nothing.
Okay,
That's what Brett's trying to get through tonight.
okay.
But doesn't that complicate the whole water remediation problem that we have here with the elevation changes? If you build a piecemeal phase one here, and you don't know how it's all gonna shake out west, doesn't that complicate how you structure where the water flows? Because it's gonna flow somewhere,
Oh, I think
right?
that.
I'm trying to understand how
I think that
this,
whatever is proposed next will have to address the water issues.
in an isolated silo or as a composite master plan?
No, based on what's actually proposed.
It has to work now.
Has to work now.
For
Has to
the
work-
silo in question that would get reviewed, not phase 1, 2, and 3 as a
Well, it has
composite.
to work for everything that's already existing.
Right.
The new.
The new and adjoining
The existing has
areas,
to work
right?
for it to be approved.
And that's how it's gonna be reviewed.
So there's motion pending.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay. We'll take it up in the context of a future proposal. So that was what the motion was, right?
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll talk later about your reboot.
Is there any other
Something about the open meeting, if there is. Discussion about open meetings.
We have an extension of it.
On the record. I'm not sure what you have.
Right, so, buildings, mixed-use buildings.
Hey, Brian, welcome back. You're
Yes, 2 stories on the west side.
All right, well, I'm gonna move to other business. Brenda Barrington extension request.
Single family, cottage style, small.
Move to extend for 6 months.
Townhouses on the bottom.
Second.
And then those are just like
Aye.
Bristol Bakers.
I think Ralph is abstaining.
That weird one there.
Who's talking?
Right here.
Yep.
Yeah, that was like a 6-plex.
And the one to the right of that.
Again, like the Bristol Bakery.
Okay, we're on.
We've got a decision.
We're on the record review discussion.
Oh, right, sorry, onward with the agenda.
We voted for Brenda Farrington's
You
extension.
did, okay, thank you.
Did you vote
I'm sorry?
on Brenda Barrington extension?
Yes,
Hey, Brett.
I'm with you.
All right.
Okay, so on the record review, we can make this fairly brief, because I didn't don't have a dog and pony show for you, but here, take one and pass it along. This is a report from 2008 from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and it will give you the primer on the record review. Did you have enough, or do you need another one? One more? Here's another one. What it means.
I think we've got
He's
gotten all the way down.
So basically, what it means.
I gave mine away apparently.
How do you do it? I think it's generally a pro article, so it talks about some of the advantages. I've talked to a couple of communities that have it. Shelburne recently is implementing it. Middlebury has been doing it for a long time and is very happy with it. Colchester considered it several years ago, and their attorney at the time, who is now an environmental court judge, Judge Walsh, recommended against it. So
Judge Walsh also did all the Hinesburg or the Hannaford stuff.
yes, and was recently overturned by the Supreme Court on the Exit 1 Quechee Highlands project that Scott Milne was famous
He
for.
believes Judge Robinson hates him.
Well, I'm starting to wonder if Judge Walsh does, have some conflict with the higher court. But in any case, he was the attorney for the town of Colchester at the time that they were considering it. And I just talked to their planner today, and she said at the time, the advice was, in order to perfect the record, which is what an on-the-record review means. It means your record is going to stand up such that the environmental court judge who hears appeals of your decisions won't have to rehear the case. The judge will simply have to review your record and decide on whether errors were made and, things were done properly and so on and so forth.
Now, do you have to do it for every application?
No,
it
and
says you don't.
that's an important piece of this, and Greg alluded to this, I think, last time this was brought up. Towns do have the ability to sculpt this or limit this to certain types of applications. You just have to do that ahead of time. You can't do it on the fly. So it may be the kind of thing where you want to have a more rigorous record and evidentiary process for major subdivisions or subdivisions over a certain number of units, or
So if someone wants to put on a porch, you don't need to go to this step.
right. So you get a lot of applications for expansion of non-complying structures, right? People who have a house in the shoreline district, it doesn't meet a setback, they want to add on do a minor addition, and they have to come to you for conditional use review. We could have on the record review for those as well. But you don't have to. You could define it as only applying to certain projects and
We could do major subdivisions and like site plans and conditional use reviews within the village growth area, just really important areas of town.
yeah, or
It could be
potentially
very
even
limited.
tie it to site plan and conditional use for new construction over a certain square footage or something. So that Lampman's wanting to make a minor change to their
Yeah.
parking lot doesn't get that kind of a review.
If it's good for one, why would you not do it for all? I mean, what, does it slow the process?
Yeah, so the general knocks on it, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan of it. But the general knocks on it are that it creates a more legalistic review process where you don't have the kind of easy back and forth with your audience and the applicant and your board, because the recording that a judge is going to listen to, it has to be clear. People have to identify themselves. Exhibits have to be numbered. You need to be able to refer to what you're talking about. And
usually comments under oath. I'm not sure it's required, but.
yeah, typically that's the case from what I understand as well. And I think in Colchester's case, at least from the planner who I was speaking with today, there was a fear that it could create an atmosphere in which people felt like they had to start bringing their attorney with them to make sure that, cross-examinations were done properly and that, they had availed themselves of all of their sort of legal rights. Because again, it's not going to be reheard by the next court. It's going, the record will be looked at and they'll rely on that. The other knock is that I think Colchester was looking at this when they were having some real issues with the Costco development, and
Costco or the gas station up there?
I think it was actually Costco, but the gas station's been going on for so long. It could,
Costco was before the on the record review.
maybe you're right, Greg. Yeah, you're probably right. In any case, what the planner said was that in controversial projects, which tend to be the larger ones that you might want to put in through a on the record review, yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Mitch. The parties can use that process to sort of gum up your works in the same way that they do at the next level when it's held, de novo again. So if you have a contentious project, it's not going to be the same sort of back and forth with your assembled mass, potentially, because perfecting the record and the party's desire to perfect the record are going to involve a lot more paperwork, bureaucratic stuff, which, to be honest with you, I'm biased. I'm your, Mitch and I are your bureaucrats to help you function. A lot of that burden's going to fall on us. So, take my feelings about it with a little grain of salt there.
To my mind, how I think these two different approaches would play out is this. For example, the Hannaford case or Black Rock, we hear a lot of testimony and we make findings of fact. If we're on the record review, the environmental court has to review the testimony that we heard and then decide whether there is substantial evidence based on that testimony that we heard to support our findings. So they're basically deferring to our findings of fact based on the evidence that we heard, unless the court determines there was not substantial evidence supporting our interpretation of the facts.
Now, can the applicant bring in a different application like they did last time?
No.
That's
how the review is different.
That's the real benefit.
If you go to the environmental court, if we don't have on the record review, you go to the environmental court, they could present entirely different evidence we did not hear, and make a brand new decision in part upon evidence we never heard. So it's basically getting a second trial with no deference to the local findings or the local process. And then that's basically the good and the bad.
That's the real benefit of it, and it is a real benefit, except, and here's where I'm going to slip my bias in, it's only a benefit to the extent that your decisions are appealed. And frankly, not very many of your decisions are appealed. Mm-hmm. So you have one
but
occasionally.
We're mostly concerned about the big ones, and that's where we're trying to focus on.
Even those don't get appealed very much.
But if we say major subdivision,
we haven't
every
had very
major
many,
subdivision has to do this.
Well, let's say Norris was a 24-unit project, was not
Well, that's what
appealed.
I remember.
There was substantial neighbor problems at the outset. Somehow they got resolved, I guess. Green Street was not appealed. Creekside, all the people who were in it, that was a 37-unit project, was not appealed. Hinesburg Center Phase 1 with Kinney Drugs and Bristol Bakery and D Physical, 18 units of housing, that was not appealed. The vet hospital built brand new over in Commerce Park, that wasn't appealed. NRG built an enormous industrial campus, that was not appealed. CVU had a huge expansion, that was not appealed. Most of your decisions, big or small, are not appealed, but
you
it
don't
is.
know.
You're right, and it is true
know.
that recently you've had a couple that were appealed, and yeah, they submitted different application materials that helped sway the judge.
So we gotta decide if
so
the
it-
benefits outweigh the negatives.
So Dennis, could I just suggest we all have the opportunity to reflect on this stuff and talk about it maybe in a month or something?
Sounds good. Your schedule is literally empty for the rest of the year.
Wow.
We don't have a single application on your schedule for.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. I mean, I think Brett will be back in front of us pretty quick because he's thinking it's going to be a similar application. But
So if
literally,
there's nothing on the next meeting.
there's
you're gonna
nothing on the next.
cancel it, or-
That's the plan. I assume you're amenable to that if you have no applicants, right?
No, I'm coming here anyway.
Come sit here for an
I'll
hour.
serve you cold pizza.
Is there gonna
Really
be dessert
cold
if they come?
That's a planning commission thing. There'll be dessert next Wednesday at the town plan hearing if you want to come to that.
What's
Lots
the-
and lots of
what are the
dessert.
Well, I
news-
move to adjourn.
What's the news and announcements? Wait, news and announcements.
Isn't it?
They did
We
it.
did it already. There's no news
The
announcement?
only news announcement is that the town plan, there's a vastly new, different town plan that these planning commissioners that are sitting amongst you have come up with, and
Really?
we're having a public hearing on it on Wednesday. Well, yeah, look at it. You won't even recognize it.
Really?
What about the water
There's an
on porch
announcement, says
lights?
there's an election next Tuesday night, in case anybody hadn't heard.
That's
There is?
true. And we'll be celebrating the following night
Who's running?
upstairs with the. Did you have a question, Dick?
So with all these big changes, what about the wattage of front porch lights? Has that been addressed yet?
You bet. Yeah. That's right, front
Because we
center.
drill down in a visionary town plan document right to the wattage of a front porch light.
Wattage
No, of
is
course
a
it hasn't
bad
been.
metric now. We want lumens. We want.
That's true,
we
it's
don't
all
want wattage.
lumens. It's all lumens.
Yeah, LEDs just blew that wattage thing right out of the
So
wall.
Trevor, you haven't resigned yet. huh?
Except when I plugged
Mitch,
in
you
an
mean?
old light
He hasn't
bulb.
turned into Trevor
I wanna
yet,
know
so
if
no, he
25
hasn't
watts is-
resigned
I don't
yet.
know how many lumens a 25-watt bulb is. It depends on how old it is.
The only other announcement is that we are advertising for the zoning administrator job, since Mitch is now our development review coordinator, and
Yep.
we have had one bite on the job announcement.
That's
But
all?
we're co-advertising, we just did it.
Oh.
We're co-advertising with the town of Richmond in the hopes that, it's really a full-time job between the two towns.
Oh.
So we're hoping we'll get some better candidates, more candidates with that in mind.
That'd be good.
5 bucks an hour should be sitting over there.
Yes, yes. Mitch will be in this seat very soon, probably at your next meeting.
Any alternates?
No, your two alternate spots are still vacant. I've been trying to encourage a certain former staff person to, step up, but he hasn't taken the bait yet.
Who?
Peter. You saw some substantial comments from him tonight on one of your applications. My reply to him was, wow, you need to be on the board.
You're bored, aren't you?
You're right, boy.
Yeah, so if
If
any
you're
of you,
bored, get
if
on the
any of you
board.
know of anyone, or if you're seeing audience members with the same faces, who you think
So-
maybe.
So, someone wrote us a treatise too, in addition to Peter.
Yes, I know. I thought I might contact him and say, I know you're new to town, but
Yeah.
you look like good board material.
Yeah, I mean, geez, I mean,
I thought you were talking about the entire Conservation Commission.
no.
No, they have enough work to do on
No,
their
I'm talking
stuff.
about Jonathan Slayson and Sarah Lovitz.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
They really,
I want to ask him if he's actually a planner in another town or something.
yeah,
Anyway.
they'd have,
So we can go home.
yep,
Okay, adjourned it is. Thank you.
yep. World Series.